His case has sent shockwaves through Germany. Markus Beckedahl, blogger, journalist, and in the opinion of Germany's domestic intelligence service, a potential traitor. He's our guest this week. Welcome. And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the DW interview. I'm Alexandra von Namen. Mr. Beckedahl, a few days ago your mother said that she was afraid that you'd be sent to prison over these treason allegations. Now, the federal prosecutor general, who'd launched an investigation against you, has been sacked. The federal justice minister is under pressure. People are criticizing the interior minister. The government has some explaining to do. Do you feel like David who slew Goliath?
Our lives are sort of disrupted right now. That goes for our staff and for my editor, Andre Meister. Things have been rather surreal since we found out that for 2.5 months the prosecutor general had been investigating treason allegations against us. On the other hand, we've experienced a huge wave of support for us. Countless private citizens, the media, and various organizations have said that this sort of attack on the freedom of the press is unacceptable, and we're just caught up in this storm.
At the moment, the high and the mighty are reeling, and your blog is still standing. Is that a good feeling?
It is a good feeling. We're a small blog that's financed by donations. We've got just 5 staffers. We've been around for 11 years. We've been expanding right along. We don't have a legal department or a lot of money. Sometimes we make risky decisions, and we stand behind them. We'd feel better if we had a legal team, but we don't. Still, we're confident that whatever happens, our readers will stand behind us. Our social network will stand behind us. We've been overwhelmed by the solidarity and support that people have shown us.
It all began when your blog, netzpolitik.org, published some classified documents that dealt with preparations to create a new unit of the Domestic Intelligence Service to monitor social networks more closely. Why was it so important for you to publish these confidential, maybe even secret, documents?
In the 2 years since Edward Snowden published his documents, we've been discussing whether it was a good idea for the Internet to be turned into a global surveillance mechanism. At first, the German government said it was not involved in this. Now it turns out that they're knee-deep in the muck of the NSA and company. And the only reforms that we've seen in the last 2 years are those that give the foreign intelligence and domestic intelligence services more power to monitor the Internet. Classified confidential documents were made available to us, and we did a major report on it. We published excerpts from the Domestic Intelligence Service budget because the documents confirmed plans for a lot more personnel and increased resources for the Intelligence Service's Internet monitoring program. That raises a lot of constitutional questions, including should the government get involved in mass surveillance as opposed to individual surveillance. We believe that in cases like this, the original document should be published so that readers can see the source material for themselves and ask the journalists some tough questions. We believe that's absolutely necessary right now because journalism is experiencing a crisis of confidence.
Given all the false information that's on the web these days, don't you have to have the original documents if you want people to take you seriously?
We knew that because we were just a small blog, the Domestic Intelligence Service could simply deny our report. I mentioned this crisis of confidence in journalism. When we, as journalists, report something, we have to get it right. Some people might say, I don't believe you because you have an agenda. But now, in the Internet age, we can publish the original documents. That's what newspapers used to do if they had the space. People can review the source material and ask the journalists tough questions. People can keep us honest. That's essential because maybe we've made a mistake somewhere or overlooked something. Our readers can help us make a good story better.
Shouldn't some documents remain classified? Because if they were made public, they could damage the interests of Germany and its people.
Of course, I understand. We wouldn't publish just any document.
Where do you draw the line? Which documents would you not publish?
In general, we would not publish documents that were classified secret, but in some cases we might come to a different conclusion. We have published confidential documents that contain no personal data, no information that would lead to the identities of intelligence officers. We just published budget data that showed that 75 new people would be hired and they'd have a budget of 2.75 million euros. That wasn't anything that would damage national security or the safety of individuals. We made a conscious decision to publish and to stand by our story if we were threatened with legal action. Of course, we had no idea that we'd ever be investigated for treason.
You think the investigations went too far?
I received a formal notification from the prosecutor general. He was required to inform us because a 6-month statute of limitations, starting from the date of publication, was about to expire. We read the notification, saw the word treason, and then did some research on the web. We knew from history that this is the toughest law that a state can use against journalists. In Germany, it's only been used twice before, in the Spiegel affair and in a case from 1983. I was in kindergarten at the time. The charge of treason hasn't been used since then. I felt like they were using a nuclear weapon against us small-time journalists, but no one wanted to admit giving the order.
Among some of your followers and supporters, there's a conspiracy theory that all of this was done to protect the intelligence services. Do you share that opinion?
Protect the intelligence services? I wouldn't call it a conspiracy theory when the government tries to intimidate critical journalists. And not just us, but also those in the mainstream media. We're just trying to shed some light on this surveillance scandal. Were Germany's intelligence agencies working with the NSA as part of a calculated effort to violate the Constitution? Did the federal government try to cover this up? It's an attempt to intimidate all investigative journalists and their sources who provide documents to them as part of the effort to investigate problems in our society. It's an attack on press freedom. So it's not a conspiracy theory. All the major political parties see it as an attack, but the Domestic Intelligence Service disagrees.
What motivates you to do this kind of work? You're said to have started your own computer company at the age of 16. You could have started a new Google or Facebook. So, what prompted you to get into journalism?
I grew up around computers, and I grew up near Bonn, so I had a natural interest in politics. After school, I started getting involved in politics. At the same time, I discovered the Internet. It was a wonderful new world for me. This was in the late 1990s, and people were becoming politically involved. I didn't believe that government policy decisions should be left to the politicians alone. I saw that there was a world of new opportunities for people to get involved and have their say. Otherwise, policy would end up in the hands of people whose interests ran counter to ours. We were using Internet technology, and we wanted to make sure that this digital world was subject to the same fundamental laws as the analog world. We wanted to communicate privately in this digital environment, just as we did in the analog world. We wanted to be able to communicate, love, consume just as freely on the Internet as we could elsewhere in society.
You describe yourself as a journalist. You've won many awards as a political journalist. But on your blog, netzpolitik.org, you and your team state, "As journalists, we are not neutral. We stand for political engagement, digital freedom." You wouldn't expect that sort of activism from a political journalist in the classical sense.
That depends on what you mean by classical sense. We come right out and say that we're taking a stand. We stand for democracy and fundamental rights. And we write from that perspective. That's more honest than journalists who claim to be objective and then push their agenda. They write reports that are favorable to business, or reports favorable to the transatlantic alliance, like the mainstream media do. And that is precisely why we're under attack right now. It's a very German concept of journalism to emphasize the ideal of absolute neutrality. Take a look at how they do it in the U.S. and Britain. Take a look at Glenn Greenwald, who helped Snowden publish his material. Their approach to journalism is similar to ours. And I think that in the U.S. it's accepted that there are different concepts of what constitutes journalism.
At the end of DW interviews, we ask guests to complete 3 unfinished sentences. Here's the first. "On Facebook, I would never post..."
Details about my personal life.
"If we got rid of all the intelligence agencies..."
We'd probably create new problems, so we demand strict controls and an end to mass surveillance.
"If I'd listened to my mom, I'd have become..."
Probably a bank clerk.
But you wouldn't be happy.
Well, she thought that bank clerks lead pretty normal lives, but I wasn't convinced. I'm glad I got involved with the internet. It was the right decision.
Thank you, Markus Beckedahl.
Thank you.